In this problem, we are to graph exponential functions based on their basic function and determine the domain, range, and asymptote. So the first one is g of x equals 2 to the x quantity minus 1. And so in this case, we would be going starting with y equals 2 to the x, and then subtracting 1 from the y values to get 2 to the x quantity minus 1. So y equals 2 to the x is an increasing function going through 0, 1 and 1, 2. When we go down 1, the graph would have y or horizontal asymptote at y equals negative 1, and would be going through the origin. So 0, 1 would move down to 0, 0. 1, 2 would move down to 1, 1. So the domain is negative infinity to infinity. For g of x, the range would be negative 1 to infinity, not including the negative 1. Since y equals negative 1 is the asymptote, and the curve does not cross that line. The y equal is needed there because it is the equation of a line. So for f of x equals 10 to the x plus 4, we're going to be starting with y equals 10 to the x and going to y to the 10 to the x plus 4. This is going to mean that we will go left 4. So starting with our basic function, going through 0, 1, and 1, 10, which is what y equals 10 to the x does, we're going to be going left 4. And when we go left 4, 0, 1 will go to negative 4, 1. And 1, 10 will go to negative 3, 10. And so the domain continues to be negative infinity to infinity, and the range continues to be 0 to infinity. 0 is not included. The horizontal asymptote is y equals 0, or the x-axis. In the third example, we start with y equals 2 to the x, go to y equals 2 to the opposite of x, and finally y equals 2 to the opposite of x quantity plus 1. So y equals 2 to the x goes through 0, 1 and 1, 2. When we replace x by the opposite of x, we reflect over the y-axis. And so 0, 1 is still a point on the graph, but now negative 1, 2 is a point on the graph. And then we have to move up 1. So when we move up 1, the horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals 1. And negative 1, 2 will move to negative 1, 3. 0, 1 will move to 0, 2. So here the domain is still negative infinity to infinity. The range is now 1 to infinity, not including the 1. And the asymptote, it's a horizontal asymptote, y equals 1. The next example, h of x equals 5 minus 10 to the x. So we'll start with y equals 10 to the x, go to y equals the opposite of 10 to the x, and finally y equals the opposite of 10 to the x plus 5, which is equivalent to 5 minus 10 to the x. So 10 is bigger than 1, so we're looking at an increasing function through 0, 1 and 1, 10. The opposite of that will reflect the graph over the x-axis, so that we're now looking at points 0, negative 1, and 1, negative 10. And then we add 5 to that, so we're moving up 5. So the horizontal asymptote will now be at y equals 5. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to change the scale here to show the points correctly. The 0, negative 1 will be 0, 4, and 1, negative 10 will now be 1, negative 5. This would obviously would be helpful to show this on a grid, because I've changed the scale as I've gone along. And so here our domain remains all reals, negative infinity to infinity. Our range is negative infinity to 5, not including the 5, and our asymptote is y equals 5. In the next example, we have h of x equals 3 to the power x minus 2, add 1. So we start with y equals 3 to the x, go to y equals 3 to the x minus 2, and finally y equals 3 to the x minus 2 quantity plus 1. So we start with an increasing function through 0, 1, and 1, 3. The x to the minus 1 replaces the x, so we're going to go 2 to the right. When we go 2 to the right, zero, 1 will now be 2, 1, and 1, 3 will now be 3, 3. And now we're going to go up 1, and so 2 points on the graph will be 2, 2, and 3, 4. The domain, all reals, negative infinity to infinity. The range, from 1 to infinity, not including the 1. And the asymptote, y equals 1. And one last example. Y equals 3 minus 2 to the x minus 1. So we start with y equals 2 to the x, go to 2 to the x minus 1, go to the opposite of 2 to the x minus 1, and lastly, add 3. So y equals 2 to the x, we know goes through 0, 1, and 1, 2. 2 to the x minus 1 will go 1 to the right. So 1, 1, and 2, 2. The opposite will reflect across the x-axis. So 1, negative 1, and 2, I'm sorry, this last one, it should have been 2, 2 in the second one. And so now we have 2, negative 2, and now we're going to add 3. So we've got y equals 3, and it's going to go down like this and go through 1, 2, and 2, y